Thank you all for joining us. I find it a privilege to make a presentation to you today. My name again is Kathleen Rivera, and I'm the founder and president of Virtual Learning Systems. Let me identify what I saw was the problem many, many years ago, if you give me just a few minutes to explain why I chose social studies. In 1997, when my son was in 7th grade, he came home with the identical civics book I had when I was in 7th grade. I literally was appalled. I put so many of those emotions aside at the time, and I decided I had to do something. I knew that this old civics book was not preparing my son for his future. The book contained nothing but reading, memorizing, and taking a test. So a little backtrack here, my main career was as a TV producer, working for just about every station on your dial. And when developing stories for programming, news, and the entertainment networks, I needed to interview people from all walks of life. And when I was interviewing Fortune 500 CEOs for their companies, the last question I always asked was, what are you not seeing in your workforce? What do you need from your employees to succeed in your company? The answer was almost always the same every time. The CEOs would say, my employees don't know how to think. They don't know how to solve a situational problem. They have a hard time working in teams. They didn't know how to research. They couldn't articulate. They can't solve a problem presented to my senior executives to help my company grow. So I would ask them, well, why the heck did you hire them? And that's another story. My education company literally produced over 1,500 K through 12 curriculums at the time. And I think, hang on, I think I'm out of order here. Let me just see. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. So I decided that I had to do something to help students become better prepared for going into a college, a career, and give them the sense of civic opportunity and why it was important to take on that civic opportunity and just get out there and vote at the time. So I decided to open up an education company, and that was back at the turn of the century. My education company at the time was awarded a contract from a very large education company to produce curriculum for making teachers better teachers. And so we held these multiple contracts to develop the curriculum. And at the same time, the federal government realized students weren't being prepared for a college or a career or a job. Big companies were complaining that the workforce was not adequately prepared enough, and these huge corporations were getting tired of creating in-house universities to train, teach, and pay for additional education so they could become productive employees. When we were producing these curriculum, like I said, we produced over 1,500 K through 12 curriculum. At the time, distribution was a problem. So we had to distribute on, VHS or a CD or then a DVD, and then printing deliverables, packaging, mailing, all that took a staff and a half, and it cost a lot of money at the time. And as the century was turning, we saw that curriculum was finally catching up with technology, and technology was finally catching up with curriculum. The internet was exploding, and distribution became easier. As my company held these multiple contracts, we knew that we had to solve a problem for the teachers to become better teachers so that the students could be more prepared for that workforce going to college or a career in out of college or not coming out of college. So we were witnessing teachers K through 12 with a huge burden of preparing these kids for life outside that classroom, not just in math and science or ESL, but for a successful life that they weren't being given in geometry or chemistry. And this is what we were finding as the years were going by, where we were producing more and more curriculum that was helping teachers be better teachers. As an education company, we saw we had to give teachers every available tool to prepare their students for life outside that classroom. And as the country was on this upswing of success, jobs were growing everywhere, hiring was rampant, and employees needed more from their new hires, much more. But at the time, the classrooms still had VHS recorders. They had a whiteboard or a blackboard and a bunch of books, and some old, some new. And teachers had to spend lots of their free time developing exciting ways to teach, engage, inform, and inspire and entertain as this technology was changing so fast. Students needed more than just learning from a book by rote or lessons written on a blackboard or watching a lengthy history video. So how are we helping teachers become better teachers with all this professional development we were creating for this education company and contracts I had? Was our curriculum preparing their students for the next century? The answer was it wasn't, and we weren't. As we faced this dilemma, overnight technology exploded, and the kids had iPhones. They could play games on their iPhones or computers for hours. Computers were loaded with incredible graphics, videos they watched for hours with storytelling techniques that kept them engaged and, of course, totally entertained. Because of this swift technology swing, if the teachers weren't prepared or savvy on a computer and creative on a computer enough to engage, inform, entertain their students in the classroom, teachers were faced with the problem of very bored students sitting in front of them. Books were becoming way too expensive, and the turnover was 5 years or more for a book to be updated. And of course, movies with TV and video gamers were exploding with all the latest jaw-dropping graphics and visuals that kept kids glued. So how could we use that technology, the latest in technology, to help teachers? So my company was driven to figure that out. How could we make significant change in the classroom using this latest in technology without complicating a platform for teachers? How could we create an engaging curriculum that would keep students glued and want more? How do we turn content into storytelling options so students learn? How do we use the latest in graphic design and still make it affordable? During all this due diligence, we heard from so many principals and teachers learning on a computer for teachers was way too complicated, and they would rather stick to the book. At the time, with all the problems to solve for teachers, as technology was growing faster and faster, we knew we had to make the commitment to making the change to help them in the classroom through social studies, not math, not science, but social studies. To prove that social studies was the beginning of preparing our students for college, a career, and with some sense of civic responsibility, and preparing them for the new world, I had to find out what the students knew about our country or the world. So I began interviewing a number of students across the country in what we call man on the street interviews, asking a number of 7th graders what they knew about our history, government, geography, and economics. Questions like, where's our nation's capital? One answer, this one student said to me, oh, I know, it's in Seattle, Washington. Another question I asked was, how old do you have to be to vote for the President of the United States? And one student answered, oh, 16, that's when I get my driver's license. Another question I asked was, how many branches of government did our founding fathers establish? And the answers would come back, what are founding fathers? Tell me about what you know of the Grand Canyon. Another answer was, oh, it's a big hole in the ground in India. When was our country founded? The answer came back by more than one 7th grader, 1812. And tell me what you know about Wall Street. One student said, oh, I know, it's in China and it's called the Wall of China. As I heard more and more discouraging answers to simple questions about our history, geography, government, economics, I literally wanted to scream. Have our students become so uneducated, uncaring, uninterested in our country, in our society, and then so uninterested about our government that they didn't care to know about why it's so important to vote? I then figured social studies could be the answer to preparing our kids for the world they were going to inherit. I had to find out why social studies and its importance. Well, I found a number of answers. Social studies help students grow their critical thinking ability by evaluating decisions taken by prominent leaders in the past. Students get the advantage of getting knowledge from other leaders' mistakes. How do you learn from others' mistakes? And is that all social studies need to teach? Of course not. The primary purpose of social studies is to help young people make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens of a culturally diverse democratic society in an independent world. Social studies develop the ability in learners to adapt to changing environments. Social studies help make students become good citizens who are capable and willing to develop our society. Social studies teaches the student the right types of values and attitudes. Yeah, you say with all this rhetoric, but the true and simple answer is by learning about our geography, history, government, and economics helps young people care. Enter inquiry-based learning and virtual learning systems social study. I'm sure all of you understand that inquiry-based learning is more than asking a student what he or she wants to know. It's about triggering curiosity, activating that curiosity, and gives the student much more than just information delivery. Tell a student and he learns in the moment. Engage the student and he learns for life. Dr. Dean Cantu is with us, and he's the Associate Dean and Director of the Department of Education, Counseling, and Leadership at Bradley University, a Professor of History, Social Studies Education, and Executive Director of the Illinois Council of Social Studies. He's here to help me answer your questions, along with Jack Liga, who helped our technology design and development in creating our web-based online inquiry-based social studies curriculum, which we'll talk about later. Going forward with our due diligence, teachers we know who use inquiry-based learning are finding it easier for them to teach, partly because it transfers some responsibility from teachers to students, but mostly because releasing the authority engages students. By releasing this authority, it engages students. Speaking of engaging, we know that kids today are using every device imaginable, watching their favorite shows, playing their favorite games, integrating others into their screen world, and of course they expect to be entertained. In our 8 years of research and development with the best of the best social studies professors and task force committees, it became clear to our company, Virtual Learning Systems, that we had to create a learning tool for teachers and students to prepare them for college careers, civic responsibility, and give them the life skills they need to succeed in the workforce. 8 years ago, we knew that the world was turning virtual on just about every platform, but especially needed in the classroom, not to replace books, but to enhance them with the visual tools needed to engage, create curiosity, retain knowledge, and more for that future classroom. Because of this global virus we're all experiencing now, that virtual future classroom is now, and teachers are now, and now parents need the tools to get them through this crisis and to carry on what students are getting very used to, and that's the virtual classroom e-learning environment. We know that the inquiry-based learning is designed to encourage reading, writing, and research, keys to be successful in the 21st century workforce. We know they have to advocate working in teams. We know that they need to be developed, we need to develop students' thinking and their evaluation skills. Inquiry-based learning teaches students how to ask questions and conduct interviews. Inquiry-based learning encourages logistical and critical thinking. It teaches them how to uncover information and evidence. It helps students reach conclusions and advocate a position taking informed action. Inquiry-based learning helps students understand the financial and economical outcomes based on their conclusions. And they are learning, retaining what they learn, and talking to one another in teams. Today's technology in the virtual classroom has to be user-friendly, password-protected curriculum for teachers, students, and now their parents. Kids love watching videos, so we know that short videos, highly graphical and to the point, is extremely necessary. Retention is very, very low, and the graphics have to be memorable and content relatable. Teachers and parents who are acting like teachers on their kitchen tables, need lesson plans at their fingertips, all designed in the inquiry-based learning platform. Again, content-driven. We know that teachers and now parents, again, need to be able to assess their learning. They need rubrics, they need think sheets, they need timelines, and a teacher dimension activities need to keep students totally engaged, all with downloadable materials. We know that teachers need additional resources at their fingertips. And as a parent, and private sector involvement is critical. Field trip experiences is the next wave of the virtual classroom, and they exist right now. And of course, standards and objectives aligned with the C3 national platform to prepare students for college careers and civic responsibility is a must. Once this virus is over and classrooms are back in session, we hope, more and more students and teachers will and are depending on virtual learning. It will and become the norm. Employers more than ever want their employees to work virtually. The cost savings are enormous, and employers are now demanding their new hires have skills to meet their expectations in a virtual disciplined environment, and that's working from home. Let me go back here. But will the e-learning virtual classroom prepare our students for college, a career in the 21st century workforce? Let's just look at that for a moment. How does virtual classrooms work? And is a question I've been asked a lot these days. The definition I came up with is a virtual classroom is an online learning environment that allows for live interaction between the tutor and the learners as they are participating in learning activities. In other words, the virtual classroom is a shared online space where the learners and the tutor work together simultaneously or not. A virtual classroom is an online classroom that allows participants to communicate with one another, view presentations or videos, interact with participants, and engage with resources in work groups. Virtual classrooms leverage the best of technology to make learning an easier and more convenient experience. And they also help bring down the costs significantly. With companies like Apple, Verizon, Google, and more giving away thousands of Chromebooks and iPads, content is key on these devices. And now for the first time, teachers and students have fingertip technology that was missing in most of the classrooms. They can now teach 21st century skills using an online web curriculum as a significant resource. Today, the use of the web to teach and learn is inevitable for both teachers and students. E-learning is a priority for businesses. So what are the characteristics of e-learning that prepares our students for that 21st century workforce and gives skills that give the kids the skills that they need to be hired? Here's what I know. E-learning uses inclusive language. It provides self-reflection opportunities. It allows user-friendly, easy navigation. It includes relevant, relatable, and real-life scenarios. Enables personalization. It responds to individual needs. It connects through multi-sensory interaction. It enhances collaboration and communication in real-time teaching and learning. It's effective in every efficient time and in management. It gives students and teachers worldwide exposure. Online learning makes students more in control of their learning path. If they want to pass the course or exam given, they need to take time to study, putting them in charge of their own learning process and therefore making them more self-disciplined. So in today's business environment, that's critical. Learning occurs best when the development of positive attitudes and perceptions is made a part of every learning task. Students learn to think positively about themselves, their peers, and the material they are learning. E-learning emphasizes these practices. With the right e-learning content in our world's history, government, economics, and geography, we are creating the e-learning student to achieve the life skills they need in the 21st century. This is our future, and we know the future is now. In summary, the benefits of virtual online learning are it accommodates everyone's needs. The online method of learning is best suited for everyone. Lectures can be taken at any time. It offers access to updated content, quick delivery of lessons. E-learning has scalability, consistency. It reduces costs. It's effective. It's flexible. There isn't a traditional 8 to 3 schedule. It gives them one-on-one attention. Recover lost credits or get ahead. It prepares students for college and careers at a self-paced environment. The overwhelming velocity of change in the world we live in today is remaking the American educational system, technology-wise, culturally, socially, and in methods of teaching and communication. The industry and the federal government have agreed in principle that the new need is to prepare students for college and careers and civic responsibility and to succeed with a happy life. To accomplish this goal, educational curriculum should be built on a totally digital platform, use inquiry-based teaching methods, and curriculum based on approved strands of history, government, geography, and economics, and maintain the highest technical standards using creative video and identifies and integrates federal and state standards and objectives. Additional curriculum should be aligned with the C3 framework. Virtual Learning Systems, which is a company that we started about 8 years ago, has met a number of these challenges. We have traveled all over the country with focus groups of superintendents, principals, teachers, parents, all asking for the same thing. Make my life easier in the classroom. Give me the tools that I need to help my students not only succeed in the 21st century workforce, but to be to be engaged and to, and I have to entertain them. Give me a tool that makes them want to come back to my classroom every day. So my company, Virtual Learning Systems, and the teams that I put together have all met those challenges and more. And I hope that you all go to www.vlseducation.com to see what we have prepared that has taken us 8 years to develop. We knew at the time that we had to create a curriculum that was for the virtual classroom to come. But we find now with the crisis that we're all facing, with students being home every day and now until the end of the year, the school year, they need an engaging, entertaining, informative curriculum that can be user-friendly for both the teachers and parents. So we're happy to answer any questions. Jack and Dr. Cantu is with us, and we'll be happy to answer anything that we may have sparked in this little discussion. Any questions?
All right, well, Kathy, thank you so much for sharing that information with our group today. The questions are now, the question box is open for you to type in your questions. We don't have any at this time, but we will wait here for the next several minutes. Here comes one from Mark. Please share the websites.
Okay, our website is up there. Our website is www.vlseducation.com. And what we have on this website is an e-brochure that you can download. And Dr. Cantu has a brief video, and he expresses the reason why we chose social studies and why social studies is so important in today's educational system. We also knew that when we created our curriculum for this virtual world, we knew that teachers couldn't spend a lot of time on professional development. So we built in professional development in our product. So when you sign up and get a code from Jack and his team, you will be eligible to receive this professional development video, which is hosted by a social studies teacher. And she walks you through how easy it is to use our curriculum with all the tools that we developed to help prepare our students to logistically think, to prepare them with all the skill sets that they need for the workforce and getting into college or selecting a career. We have in these 4 strands of government, economics, geography, and history, we've developed 13 strands, 13 units under those strands. And if on our website, it shows the 13 units that we are historically preparing, and there will be more to come. But right now we have 13 units that you can, a teacher or a student or a teacher or a parent can use for a week. They can use it for a month, or they can use it for a whole semester. And that's how Dean has designed the curriculum, with all the tools that teachers need to get students to that next level. Dean, is there anything that you want to add on why social studies and why it's important and what we've created?
Sure, absolutely, Kathy. The social studies, as you know, is one of the core subject areas, but it's oftentimes overlooked within the curriculum, within state testing, depending on the state itself. But I know in Illinois, we went through a resurgence relative to social studies education a few years ago. I was fortunate to serve on the task force that was put together by ISB to update the standards. And at that time in Illinois, just like a number of other states, we looked to the C3 framework as a guide, as a curricular scaffolding, if you will, to guide us in the process of truly making the social studies standards something that is relevant and meaningful in the 21st century. And there's just a real 180. Social studies, for generations, unfortunately, has sometimes been perceived as names and dates. But that's far from what it is, and the C3 framework brought that out with the emphasis on inquiry and on historical investigation and the integration of primary source documents into the curriculum, emphasis on students engaging in historical interpretation, analysis, and evaluation, and in triangulation of data sources, of evidence, and arriving at their own conclusions based on primary documents, based on fact and evidence, and then taking that information and then going out into the community and taking informed action. So it really is a curriculum, if you will, social studies today, that it was always what it was meant to be. It always had that potential, but because I think so many states over the last 5 to 10 years have gone in and revised their standards so that there is that emphasis on inquiry and on integration of primary source documents, I think that is sort of a new dawn, if you will, for social studies education. So for us, this was a perfect fit. The other thing is that you'll find, as Kathy mentioned, is that VLS social studies is really sort of the nexus, if you will, of that 21st century social studies, as well as taking advantage of 21st century technology. So we truly try to integrate that throughout, and we have what I think is a very engaging online platform for students as well as for teachers to integrate into their curriculum. And that adaptability, that scalability that Kathy mentioned, you're going to find that here as well. So what we've provided is a curriculum, but it's also one that teachers can adapt for their respective classrooms.
Yeah, one of the things that we did to engage our students is to turn them into social studies investigators. And what that does is it creates an experiential learning by turning those students into a social science investigator. We call them SSIs. By putting students in the roles of an SSI, they instantly become those active learners as they conduct their investigation. And students learn how to ask questions, they discover facts, they evaluate data, they identify chains of events, they're able to collaborate and draw their logistical conclusions. And VLS has given them assignments also to require students to develop multimedia communication skills and an ability to advocate a point of view. On some of our special projects, students may work in a multi-size group, or they can work alone, where they will come to a consensus and report their findings. And they can report their findings in a number of different ways that they're comfortable with. And there's no wrong way here. They can create a PowerPoint that demonstrates their findings and the economic outcomes. They can create their own little video. We give them the tools and the accessibility to do that. They can just stand up in front of the class and give an oral report. So they are able to draw their own conclusions, present it in a form that they are comfortable with, and the teacher can assess what they knew before, during, and after with the rubrics that we have developed and the assessment tools that we give teachers, which are all downloadable. We really have tried to make the teachers' lives very, very easy in this e-learning environment, which is starting to explode. So we knew we had to make it user-friendly. It's password protected, which is key. The student gets a password, the teacher gets a password, or the parent gets a password, and then they can take it. They can look at the professional development video, and it's very easy to walk through, and they're on their way to learning about the world that they are going to be inheriting, and the life skills that they need to move on to college or a career, or a civic responsibility, which again we found very, very key when we were doing our due diligence for the past 8 years. We found out that more and more students didn't care whether or not they voted, and we were asking why. And it's because they didn't know enough about our Constitution or the Illinois Constitution, which are 2 of the units that we have created. They didn't know why civil rights was so important and what was the big deal, which was, was jaw-dropping to us as creators of what students were needing in the classroom, and why these kinds of units were more important to get them through the life that they're living in this 21st century. How to pass a bill was another one that we created, and that was because the kids didn't understand what even a bill was and what it does and how it affects their life. So that unit is very visual and much needed. And we did a unit on the Great Chicago Fire, which the kids love. And each unit starts out with a peer-hosted video, a student of their age level in a brief video, 3 to 5 minutes, and it's like the foundation for the content of the rest of the learning tools that we have created. So we show them why Chicago burned down, what was going on at the time, and again, it's very, very visual, and what Chicago became as a result of this devastation. And then the kids are able to take out into their community and ask questions to their leaders in their community. For instance, we require them to go out and ask their fire chief, their police chief, one of the community leaders, if there was a devastation in our town or our city, are we prepared? They ask them questions about what are some of the solutions? Do I have to worry about my community burning down? And so this Great Chicago Fire unit, for what's happening around the world and what's happening in our country with the fires and the floods and the hurricanes, it becomes very relevant today on how to prepare for these disasters. And so they come back to the classroom and they give their analysis of what their community leaders have set forth to establish a safe haven in their community. So These are just a few of the units that we've developed based on the needs that we heard from the teachers in our focus groups all over the country. Dean, have you got anything to add to why VLS and the programs that we've created are helping teachers today?
Absolutely, and I think you touch on some of it, Kathy. And again, I'm a former high school history, social studies teacher myself. Now at the university level, I teach our undergraduate social studies methods course for individuals going into middle school and high school history education. And some things, well, some things have changed, some things have remained constant, and that's sort of the history of history, social studies education. There's a professor, Larry Cuban, and an author who wrote about change and continuity in social studies education. And I think what you find is that drive on the part of social studies teachers to want to try to integrate primary documents into their classroom. That's been there for generations. I know when I was a social studies teacher, there was something called jackdaws, which were paper packets of primary documents. Now, of course, all of these documents, primary source documents, photographs, broadsides, posters, maps, illustrations, political cartoons, they're all available in the Library of Congress, National Archives, and other digital resources. And one of the things that we've tried to do with VLS Social Studies is to integrate those into the units so that we can take advantage of this true wealth of resources out there. I know one of the units on U.S. entry into World War II, there's a series of interviews that are available on the Library of Congress site, for example. It's called A Day of Infamy, Man on the Street Interviews, and they were taken and recorded, oral history, recorded shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And you can hear these oral interviews that reside right now solely in the Library of Congress, but we've taken those and given them sort of another life so that they're integrated into an engaging activity within that unit where students can go back in time and listen to individuals who were interviewed and their response to the attack on Pearl Harbor. So those types of treasures of primary documents that are out there and they're available, we've integrated those throughout because teachers have always wanted to try to do that, and now it's easier, now than ever before to do that. But there's just a wealth of them. It's almost overwhelming with how many, primary documents are out there. So we've taken those and we've arranged those so that they're aligned with the standards, and we've also integrated, as Kathy mentioned, authentic learning activities. So we have students going out and they're taking on the role of being historians or geographers, and they're out there conducting interviews, oral history projects themselves, and so we tried to integrate, really synthesize all of the best of teaching and learning, sort of best practices, if you will, into these teaching units. But the other thing that I think you'll find, and I know as a former high school social studies teacher, one of the things I always wanted is I wanted the ability to edit and adapt the curriculum to my classroom, to my students. And you have that ability to do that with the, I don't like the word or the moniker worksheets, so we call these think sheets because we don't want students to see engaging in the activities that we have as onerous sort of work. We want them to think, and there's an emphasis on higher order thinking. So in the think sheets that we provide, though, these are available so that teachers can adapt those, and you can add to it, you can modify it, you can integrate other elements to it makes it nice for them to be able to adapt it to the classroom. Likewise, all of the activities, there are performance assessment rubrics. These are adaptable as well. We've got these populated with different performance criteria and different information relative to the levels of performance for each of the categories, but teachers can go in there and they can adapt those to their classroom. And I think that adaptability, that scalability is really important, and that's one of the key features or pillars of the VLS social studies curriculum.
Any questions out there?
Yeah, we have had some additional questions roll in. Here's one from Mark. He asked, does the curriculum, or can the curriculum be used for special education in 9 to 12 and adult ESL?
Dean?
Sure. The curriculum, again, because of the ability to adapt the curriculum, it makes it easier for teachers to go in and differentiate. Again, as a former high school teacher, I found that to be important, whether you're talking about students with exceptionalities or even ELL students in the classroom. there's an ability for teachers to go in and adapt that and either supplement it or differentiate the instruction for students depending on their ability level. And also for English language learners as well. I think our curriculum, particularly with if you look at, and again, we at Bradley have an ESL endorsement embedded into our teacher preparation programs in elementary and middle school, early childhood, and in our LBS 1, our special education curriculum. And so with respect to that, you'll see one of the things that Kathy mentioned is the emphasis on making this very visually powerful. And I know in the teaching of English language learners, a lot of times having those visual cues and those visual resources helps to facilitate the teaching process. And so you'll find that one of the things I strive for in developing the curriculum is to make it visually powerful as well. So I think those who are teachers of English language learners will find the curriculum to be a good fit as well.
Any other questions?
A couple people have asked about, can students view a webinar like this? And as I mentioned in the beginning, this will be recorded and a link will be sent to everyone. So if you would like to share this webinar with your students, you are free to do that as well. Question from Nicole: what age range is this curriculum geared towards?
Dean, I can certainly answer that, but Dean, you're the authority here, so go ahead.
We've designed this curriculum intentionally for the middle grades level, and that allows teachers, even teachers at the high school level, to adapt it and use it at the certainly at the 9-12 and certainly in the lower grades of the high school level as well. But again, we've got it aligned with standards at both at the middle school as well as the high school level. So I think it's a good fit for either one. And when you go through there, I think you'll find that if you look at the curriculum that is in place in Illinois as well as other states, I think you'll see it's a really good fit, both with respect to the middle school and to into the high school standards that you'll find.
Yeah, one of our teachers in our school district asked me if they could use one of our units for their 4th grade class, and they wanted permission to use the Illinois State Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, and she was teaching that in 4th grade. So, and they're loving it, and the kids are loving it, and they see the graphics and the substantial content that's easy for them to understand. And it's also being used in the 9th grade at one of our schools in our district. So we're saying these units can go from 4th grade to 12th grade.
And if I could add, Kathy, too, I think it is a really good fit for the 4th grade. In Illinois, even though we don't call it the Expanding Horizons approach, if you look at a lot, that's been sort of the guiding principle for the development of social studies standards in the United States in K through 6. And if you look at the 4th grade, a number of states emphasize the state. State government, state history, and so on. So I would agree completely that I think 4th grade is a really good fit relative to what the curriculum focuses on anyway, which is an emphasis on the state.
Yes, and one of the things that we make sure that's embedded in every one of our curriculum is that opportunity to go out into the community, go to your parents, your grandparents, and interview them. For instance, in one of our units is on the Montgomery bus boycott and the civil rights movement. And when I was giving a demonstration to a 6th grade class, they were appalled that during the 1960s, their half brothers who are African American or their brothers who are African American could not drink out of the same water fountain as they could, being a white boy. And so the curriculum takes you through that turnover in the 50s, 60s, and what's going on today. And so we encourage them to ask your mother, ask your father, ask your grandmother what they were doing in the 60s. Were they aware of some of the horrific things that were going on with African Americans at the time, where they couldn't eat at a lunch counter or go to the bathroom in the same place that they could. So they come back with these stories from their grandparents and their great grandparents and their aunts and uncles, and hearing what they have discovered by interviewing their loved ones or a community leader was very, very touching to me. I almost, I had to help hold back the tears when I was listening to some of the things that they came back with by interviewing their loved ones and what was going on at the during the civil rights movement. And the kids became really articulate. And I was amazed at these fifth graders who were so articulate in their findings. I knew we were on the right track. And so it's our hope to create more units and have a number of units available by the end of next year that are going to be in this time frame, in this social studies atmosphere. We know that having an inquiry-based learning tool provides teachers with an ideal platform for engaging the students and placing them in roles in which they are called on to use the same knowledge base and skill set used by historians, by geographers, political scientists, and economists in this authentic real-world situation scenarios that we are giving them. Any other questions?
Yes, a two-parter from Khalid. Number one of the challenges that I'm grappling with is this question about whether we are preparing our scholars for a world that doesn't exist through our day-to-day instruction. You mentioned a few items that resonated. In your opinion, what are the non-negotiables that should be in place to ensure that scholars are adequately prepared for a workforce that doesn't exist?
Boy, that's a great question. Dean, can you help this gentleman out?
It's a very good question, and it is a challenge of education, K-12 education writ large, in terms of, and even in higher education where I find myself now, is we are preparing a generation of scholars, of learners, for a world that doesn't necessarily exist right now, for occupation professions that aren't manifest right now. So I think, though, at its core, and it's a very good question. I think the individual that posed the question alludes to this, though. There are still core skills and core or foundational knowledge, I think, that have to serve as a platform for whatever we do. And I think that's one of the things that you'll find here. And this is what I like about the C3 framework, is if you go back to it, there, it's comprised of 4 dimensions. The first one is inquiry, preparing or articulating questions. But the second one, it gets back to, I think, that what the question is about, and that is applying disciplinary tools and concepts. If you look at history, for example, and where I've spent most of my career at the teaching at the high school and at the university level, history, there are certain core concepts, certain core principles, certain elements of being a historian, a student of history, if you will, that don't change. And one of those is the evidence, the primary documents that are out there that historians, go out and investigate, and then they triangulate, and then they, test, hypotheses that they have, theses that they pose. And that art of historical investigation, if you will, of historical interpretation, analysis, evaluation, that remains true. What has changed, though, is certainly the availability of literally an abundance, probably more than tenfold, probably 1,000, 10,000-fold of resources that are at our fingertips now. But those basic core beliefs and understanding and skills that are necessary for individuals to engage in historical research, those remain true today. I know Sam Weinberg, wrote a book on historical investigation and historical thinking and other unnatural acts is the title. I kind of like that. But in there, he talks about how historians approach the evaluation, analysis of primary documents in a completely different manner than most students do in high school, for example. Students in high school, when you give them a primary document, they start, like if it's a political cartoon, they start to evaluate the political cartoon. Historians go down to the bottom and they look at the citation, the data. They try to find out who developed this political cartoon, when was it developed, where was it developed, what is the historical context, and then they proceed to analyzing the cartoon itself. And I think it's helping our students to become historians and understand the art of historical investigation. That has not changed over the past few centuries. Those core skill sets, I think, if you will, are absolutely requisite to engaging in history today in the 21st century. So we find ourselves in a different time. We find ourselves in a period in which technology is ubiquitous, but some of those core foundational types of skills remain true. So I think it's ensuring that you build that foundation, but that's not a terminal step. You have to then allow them to apply it to the real world and take advantage to all of the digital resources that are available to us today.
And one of the things that we made sure, one of the tools that had to be included in our social studies curriculum is easy access to the resources that are available out there, depending on the subject that they want to teach or the unit they want to teach. We built in those resources at the teacher's fingertips and at the parents' fingertips. So in our curriculum, we know that that's important. No matter what curriculum that you're going to be using, the resources have to be easily accessible, and everything has to be designed to be so user-friendly, because the parents are now taking over a lot of the day-to-day teaching. And if it's not easy to use, then it's not going to be used and the kids will fall back. So we know that inquiry-based learning, with easy teacher tools available and resources available that will engage students and prepare them for the life skills they need, has to be going forward embedded in e-learning, in an e-learning environment. Any other questions?
Yeah, follow up from Khalid. To what extent does this curriculum ensure that other cultures are accurately represented and that their stories are told?
Oh, good question. Another good question. Dean?
Sure, absolutely. And that is essential. I agree 100%. And that's one of the things that is so important in teaching social studies in the 21st century. It's always been important, but now more than ever, I think we collectively are more conscious of it. And that is the fact that we do need to ensure that when students engage in historical investigation and start to conduct research, that they recognize that some of what they're going to come across is going to have biases. Some of what they come across is going to have a number of elements to it that may be disturbing. History and social studies, I feel very fortunate to have taught both at the high school and at the university level, because it is powerful. It is a powerful subject area. For me, it's the most meaningful and relevant of the core curriculum areas. And if anything, I think our current situation with the pandemic illustrates that. It's a study in sociology, it's a study in history, it's a study in government, it's a study in economics, and I think it's important that when we engage students in that type of investigation, that they're aware of that we arm them with that information that you're talking about there, so that they can better understand what they're going to encounter. And historians fight this all the time as well. If you look at the history of whether it's certain events in history or individuals in history, our interpretation of those individuals has changed over time, because we've looked at them through the lens of the 21st century, as opposed to perhaps when biographies were written of individuals in the 19th century or early 20th century. They may have overlooked things, or they may have been written at a time where some of those biases were still manifest in American society. So we have matured, we have evolved, I think, in terms of our perspective of social studies. And we need to ensure that our students have that skill set, so when they engage in these investigations that we have, that they're cognizant of that as well, and that you actually make that part of the teaching and learning process, as you teach the unit, and you bring that to the forefront. There's no reason to make that something that is surreptitious. That should be something that is part of the teaching and learning process.
I know that our time is running out, but I wanted to leave with the thought, Dean, and this is where you can help me out. Would you please tell our listeners why the study of geography, government, our economics, and of course history, but address why those 4 strands give the students the opportunity to succeed in the 21st century workforce?
Absolutely. Social studies is a big umbrella. Social studies is comprised of a number of different disciplines. Certainly history, and when we say history, we're talking about, state, local, we're talking about U.S. history, we're talking about world history. But history, government, geography, and economics are the ones that are, I guess, are at the top of the list. And in terms of the C3 framework, those are the 4 major strands that were addressed in the framework itself, in that book that was to serve as a guide for the new state social studies standards. Illinois is no exception. Those are the 4 major strands within the Illinois learning standards for social studies. In a number of states, it's the same thing. But we also have the behavioral sciences, sociology, psychology, and anthropology that do have a presence. They're sort of an appendix, if you will, within the C3 framework, but they also are subject areas within the high school curriculum, and in particular, and particularly psychology and sociology. But in terms of the relevance to today, Kathy, I think what you'll find is it gets back to what we talked about. I don't think it's been more relevant than today. It is today for individuals to go through and have that. Again, for social studies, civics was our segue into a seat at the table, if you will. But I think it's certainly in civic education and civic life, is the moniker in the C3 framework, is absolutely essential. But so is history and government and economics, and so are the behavioral sciences as well. Like I just said, with the pandemic, if you look at it through the lens of sociology, psychology, as well as government, economics, and so on, to look at even geography, as we start to look at the impact of the COVID-19 in different regions, all of those skill sets, all of that knowledge is really comes to bear on our interpretation and our analysis of where we're at, and also where we're going as a society.
Any more questions?
One question was, do you have just social studies curriculum? And if so, are there any plans to develop other core subject lessons?
Well, yes, yes, and yes. Right now, we focused on social studies because we saw the need on a number of levels, as I discussed. Yes, our future is hopefully going to develop units in science. I think science would be our next, but right now we want to create a number of units that teachers really want. Based on our focus groups across the country, they want a timeline of history that crosses over to our economics, or our that crosses over into our geography. For instance, one of the units that we'll be developing is on the Mississippi River, and what the Mississippi River did to our economy of our nation and the world. The geography of the Grand Canyon, which we have created, is another source of why we need to protect our environment. And that leads to so many different lesson plans inside that one unit that is so pertinent to today's economics. And so it's all integrated, but right now we're concentrating solely on social studies because there's so much to learn and so many units that we can develop that's going to help teachers prepare students for the 21st century workforce, with all the lesson plans that Dean was talking about. And the content that we have to develop is so rich. We know that social studies is going to be our go-to right now. And ideally, I'd like to have 50 units by the end of next year. So the more that I can get out there to school districts, we can prepare and create more units in the next year or two.
All right, wonderful. Well, that's all the time we have for questions today. If you would like one of the virtual learning systems teams to reach out to you directly to learn more about their curriculum that they have available, type yes into the questions box now, and we will make sure that they get your email address so that they can follow up with you directly.
Yes, that would be great. And we look forward to hearing from all of you. And Dean, Jack, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. And leaving you with the last thought that distribution is critical to any of the curriculum that you want to use in your classroom or a parent needs. Distribution is, again, critical. And what we have designed is a very user-friendly distribution outlet where all you're going to have to do is, once you get a code from us, a password you'll create, all you'll have to do is just click on your on the link. It'll be that easy for you. So I look forward to hearing from all of you, and thank you so much for the time that you've given us today. I know it's precious, and good luck to everyone out there in this e-learning environment.
Absolutely. Everybody stay safe out there and take care of each other. Appreciate you joining the session. Kathy, Dean, and Jack, thank you guys so much for the valuable information. We are concluding the webinar recording at this time, and you may close out of the GoToWebinar control panel, and that will log you out of the session for today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.